Welcome to Zoom. Please press pound, then enter your meeting ID, followed by the pound sign again. You are in the meeting now.
Testing, testing.
Podium mic check, 1, 2. Check, 1, 2. Mic check, 1, 2. Caption test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Try to keep up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yesterday. Yeah, I don't know.
70% of the people that died were white.
Oh, a lot of them, yeah, no, when you shoot a senator,
Well, that's right. All right, guys, but he was
apocalypse right now.
he was represented.
Yeah,
Wait, have you heard the audio tape of that one?
some of
Because
it.
you can get it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
Well, what about Moscow? He's like, yeah, Moscow's bad. You
Yeah.
know what to do with it. Just read it. It's okay. Just get in line. It's all good. But yeah, I can't let my hair go anymore. Dude, I can't grow it.
So we took the audio engineer, everyone there, to figure out that. Yeah. You guys are saying you're going to do it.
You said you were right, my lady. What happened?
This is what the teachers feel like on the first day. Like, we've been here a week, and the drive back.
And yesterday. Today's good.
Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah.
We were told that a holiday.
Do what?
They're in that last that meeting. All that. Holiday falls under the holiday.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yeah, they said you don't have to make them an extra day.
So you should be making Monday, Friday. You can get them.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like 9 or 10.
The third I go on to Grandview.
It's a holiday, and I actually have Friday off. Mondays are also like a little long.
It's good, man. What's probably
I checked the microphone.
Do you guys need a switch, or do you have plenty of port from where you need?
Oh.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Joaquin Esquivel, Chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. Today is Tuesday, June 18th. It is 9 a.m., and I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'll begin by introducing my fellow board colleagues. Joining us virtually is Vice Chair Doreen Diadamo, and here in person we have Board Member Laurel Firestone, Board Member Nicole Morgan, and Board Member Sean McGuire. As you can see, this board meeting is a hybrid meeting with virtual and in-person components. For those of you joining us virtually, you're either viewing us through our customary webcast on the Cali PA website or YouTube Live. But if you intend on commenting on any of today's items, you need to be on the Zoom platform. In order to get on the platform, there are instructions at the top of the agenda, but if you're having any challenges, please do just email the clerk of the board at board.clerk@waterboards.ca.gov, and she can help you get on the platform. Once you're on the platform, your camera will be off, you will be on mute until it is your turn to speak on the item you've indicated. Good morning for everyone here in the room. Quickly, I forgot to also introduce our Executive Director, Eric Oppenheimer, our two Chief Deputies, Jonathan Bishop and Karen Mogus, our Chief Counsel, Michael Loffer, our Clerk of the Board, Courtney Tyler, and assisting her today is Margie Argel. For those of you joining us here in the room, a few announcements for us as well. Please do observe the exits. If we happen to have an emergency, we'll calmly file out to Cesar Chavez Plaza and await further direction. And if you intend on commenting on any of today's items, there is a QR code on the side of the room and a laptop in order to sign up. Once you're at the podium, please do introduce yourself and any affiliation you're part of. And lastly, please do silence any phones so we can have an uninterrupted discussion today. With that, we can move into first public forum before we get into board business. I believe we have two commenters joining us this morning, and I believe our first commenter will be Mary Wood, who will be followed by John Eric. Good morning, Ms. Wood. The microphone is likely cold. There's a button there at the base that will turn it on for you.
That one?
Yes. Good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning. I want to say thank you for this opportunity to speak to the chair and members of the Water Board, and this opportunity to connect on more of a personal level. I have found that this personal level is not really available through the county and the state personnel. I have been responded to different items where I've been complaining, but it's usually they send an email saying, well, you need a public record request, you need this, you need that, you look on, this regulation. Sometimes I understand what you're saying, but I don't understand that the process. I need somebody to help me. I find that attorneys who are not involved in water don't know the entire process, so you're left out in the cold. And people who do understand the process basically look at it and say, 50% is not that horrible to pay for the revenue of your whole association, like I paid because I'm a commercial property. I want somebody to be able to help me, and I've never found that. And I do find that studies, surveys, services, and penalties are not created equal with the different sizes of associations and such. And I don't know what to say, except I speak for 6 million small association members who could potentially have this same problem. I was working on my property, which has had no water for 3.5 years now, coming up close to 4. And one of my former customers came up and said, are you still going through that? And I said, well, I know you have water problems too. It's 30 miles out in a very small association too. And they go, well, we don't want to be in your boat. No water at all, $90,000 in attorney's fees, and still no arbitration. I think there should be somebody who can answer my questions. I think there should be somebody who will help me. And I don't find it. So anyway, I think the buck has to stop somewhere, and I think we have to collaboratively work together. And there's no stupid questions. Like, I used to be a social worker, and a woman said, "My gosh, you know, I buy water for myself because I think the water's bad. How about Trixie, my little dog of 5 years, you know?" I said, "I don't know. I don't know if the bad water is even bad. It depends on what contaminant and stuff like that." And then she could say, "And I have a garden out there. My tomatoes, are they contaminated also?" It takes a scientist to answer those questions. But if you don't ever hear questions like that, because they're too petty, too small, my association is too small, then you're never going to help fix the problem. You're not part of the solution. You're part of the problem. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. I don't think we're completely understanding perhaps what challenge you're having with your water provider. Mr. Loffer can certainly help kind of provide a little more clarity as well when we have a chance. So thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wood. Next, I'd like to call up John Eric.
Mr. Herrick, if you could press *6 to unmute yourself.
Apologies, Mr. Eric. I think you became muted again. So if you don't mind, just one more time pressing *6, you should be able to unmute.
Now it should be working. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Sorry about the confusion. I appreciate the opportunity. Mr. Chairman, board members, for some reason my Zoom link didn't work, but that's because I'm old and stupid, but we'll ignore that for now.
Not in the least.
The reason I wanted to talk today is keep you guys aware of what's going on. Last summer, when we had flows between 3,000 and 4,000 CFS at Vernalis in August, we had some water level issues on Middle River, which was unexpected and very surprising to all the parties involved. So we got through that. And then this past November, and I have a video that the farmer sent me, if they can play that there, this last November on the 20th, Middle River looked like a sewer drain rather than a river. It was about 3 feet wide and about 6 inches deep. And the farmers took a copy of that and sent it to me and said, "Hey, what's going on?" Since that time, DWR and South Delta have investigated the issue, and we can't really identify why it was so bad on that particular day. It is not that bad now, but we're worried that it might reoccur that way. So after much investigation and evaluation, it looks like the high flows of 2023 made the silt problem worse. They didn't move the silt out. So Middle River is now extremely clogged. The bathymetry that DWR and South Delta took this year shows that it's significantly shallower and that, the channel configuration is nowhere near what the modeling thinks it is. So the model thinks there's 4 or 5 feet of depth, and on that one instance, there was like 6 inches of depth. So we've got that huge problem here. So we're working on that. We're trying to figure out what to do. If we have to do some sort of emergency dredging program, I would ask that the board staff, if they can identify any sort of, authorization or funding that might help, if that has to be done, I'd appreciate that. But more importantly, I want to bring to your attention the problem that we're going to face this summer, and that is transfers approved by the board result in an increase in export pumping. The export pumping affects the water levels at at Middle River anywhere from, a couple tenths to a whole foot of depth. So in order to protect against those incremental problems, D1641 include a water level response plan. Excuse me. That plan sets minimum water levels below which transfers cannot occur, but those low levels were just determined by discussions between South Delta and DWR, whenever that was, 25 years ago. It has been found over the years, about 20 years, that the water level protection number for Middle River is wrong. It's not protective. I cannot get DWR or the Bureau to sit down and renegotiate that number or figure out what it should be. They very politely refuse. The water level response plan requires the parties to review and change those numbers if the analysis indicates they're not protective. It also requires temporary pumps and other things to be done by DWR and the Bureau, and they're not doing those things. So I need the state board staff to review the water level response plan under D1641, talk to DWR and the Bureau, and tell them that based upon the information from South Delta Water Agency, the minimum water level for Middle River is not protective, and the parties are obligated under their license or their permits to find the correct one and to implement that, as well as do other things to mitigate. And so I make that, a very polite demand that staff move forward on this. And no offense to staff, but over the years, I've raised this issue numerous times, and it's been very silent from all parties involved, especially the Bureau and DWR and Bureau and State Board staff. So I'm asking the chair to direct staff to contact DWR and the Bureau, remind them of their obligations, and tell them that transfers should not be approved henceforth without compliance with the water level response plan. So I hope the video played for you guys so you could see just how bad it was. And with that, I'll take any questions or I'll let you move on.
It did play, and I really appreciate, Mr. Eric, you flagging this for the board here. I think what we need to do is unpack the issue a bit more. I know that here the desire for additional dredging and to help with the way water moves in the South Delta and ultimately the interaction there with project operations is something that's been a topic for, as you said, a while. And I think, probably most appropriately with the Delta Water Master's Office, just some fact finding around potentially what's occurring and how to help best address, if there is on the water right side, maybe some further discussion. So I appreciate you flagging it. But at this point, what I think the direction will certainly be is to better understand this for ourselves here. And here, I know we'll have an update from the Delta Water Master, and perhaps it's out of his office that it's best handled. So just really appreciate the flag, Mr. Eric, and your time this morning.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Just so everybody knows, if the conditions that we saw in that video reoccur this summer, then a number of farmers will go out of business without being able to divert to their lands. So thank you very much. I look forward to further involvement.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Eric. Looking to
Thank you. Bye-bye.
to see if there's any further public forum, and seeing none. Appreciate everyone who took time this morning to address the board. And thank you, Mr. Loffer, for speaking further with Ms. Wood. Now that brings us to official board business. And our first item is adoption of the June 4th board meeting minutes. Are there any adjustments, comments, or otherwise a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you both. Ms. Tyler, can you please call a roll call vote?
Excuse me, Board Member Morgan,
Aye.
Board Member Firestone,
Aye.
Board Member McGuire,
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo,
Aye.
and Chair Esquivel.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. The board meeting minutes are adopted, and now brings us to a tranche of uncontested items. Just checking to make sure they are still uncontested. Looking to any fellow board colleagues if they want discussion, and seeing none, and appreciate the good work that's gone on to items number 2 and 3 here. Without any further discussion, though, up for a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt items 2 and 3.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Tyler, can you please call roll call vote?
Board Member Morgan,
Aye.
Board Member McGuire,
Aye.
Board Member Firestone,
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo,
Aye.
and Chair Esquivel.
Aye. Thank you as well. The 2 items are adopted and appreciate, again, the good work I know that's gone into them. Next brings us to a tranche of informational items, and the first one will be an update periodic report from our Office of the Delta Water Master. Not seeing our Delta Water Master currently in the room. I think we may need to take a quick break until Mr. Ziegler shows here. Let's go ahead and give ourselves a 5-minute break. We'll come back here at 9:20 and continue on to item number 4 here. All right, we're at 9:20. We can come back here. Good to see you, Mr. Ziegler. Good morning. We're on item number 4, and our update from the Delta Water Master. Good to see you.
Good morning, Chair Escobar and board members. It's a delight to be with you this morning, and look forward to our exchange and catching up on our quarterly report today. Thanks. Next slide, please. I'm going to be talking this morning about a couple of big initiatives that the office has been involved in. Our continuing work in using the OpenET-based water data reporting platform for all reporters in the Delta, or aiming actually to get all reporters in the Delta on the OpenET-based platform in compliance with Senate Bill 88 and Delta-wide alternative compliance plan approach. Reviewing the Delta Drought Response Pilot Program results, especially focusing on water year 2023, and some of the follow-up work that the Delta Measurement Experimental Consortium is undertaking that really builds out of the Delta Drought Response Pilot Program. Next slide, please. So just to briefly review the pathway to the Alternative Compliance Program and the Delta ACP, this effort really began with my predecessor dating back to 2017, engaging all Delta water stakeholders, all different pathways for applied technologies across the academic sector, across Western water users and other states, and looking at experts really from all of the Western states to help us develop a methodology that would work in the Delta. The advantage of applying OpenET is that it provides consistent, reliable, and credible data for the water community to use to better understand consumptive use in the Delta in the big picture, and we believe provides a pathway for getting close to much better understanding of real-time consumptive use in an applied way in the Delta. So especially interested in those heavy irrigation months from June into October and its effects on the Delta. And you know, as we have discussed, the platform really is the first effort that aligns a point of diversion with a place of use for all water users in anywhere in California, but across the Delta, so that in identifying any particular diversion, you can also map it to where that water is applied on the ground. Next slide, please. And last year, as we noted, we got close to 80% reporting overall on the OpenET platform and deltaacp.com. We are headed toward getting above 80% this year. We may be able to even bring that over a bit. We've, due to some technical challenges, we did postpone the reporting deadline actually until just yesterday. And so we're still compiling data, but we're just very pleased at the level of adoption throughout the Delta. Next slide, please. The one caveat I would underscore in this is that this effort has been led by the Central and South Delta, try to say that 3 times fast, Central and South Delta water agencies, both in investing capital up front to really help deliver the OpenET-based reporting methodology and software platforms. Additionally, what we have found is just the need for continued communication with all stakeholders, continued airing of the results, and to follow up in questions. So that's where the Delta Measurement Experimental Consortium work continues to be very beneficial in building confidence in the reporting results of the process. We're seeing a very high level of response in Central and South Delta, above 90% on the ACP platform. We're a bit below that in North Delta, and again, I think there's a sense of ownership here, as well as a need for really active board engagement of each of the Delta water agencies, and that's been a bit deeper in the Central and South Delta than it has in North Delta. Next slide, please. So earlier this year, I shared with you that there was a Desert Research Institute study that validated that the OpenET data coming in based on a number of Western state analyses that they did, including in Delta, shows that we are, for applied irrigation on land, in the range of 8.5% or less in an error bar. And that's really extraordinary in water data reporting. And so we're feeling really good about the quality of the data that we're bringing in and being able to integrate on the OpenET platform. Next slide, please. So that's the top slide here is the process, if you were a user, you open up the website, you have an assigned ID and password, and so we protect the integrity of that data in a very serious way, so that it's consistent with board protocols and additionally other wider privacy concerns. I think I just want to underscore that there are findings that my predecessor made, which I would underscore are continuing to be valid today, that if under the terms of SB 88, if a plan is found to be infeasible, provides less quality data, or provides an extraordinary cost burden, then you are effectively making a determination that there needs to be an alternative to that kind of reporting protocol. And for direct diversion reporting, Metropolitan made an estimate earlier this year and has publicly reported that their costs engaging all of their siphons across the four Met owned islands would run between 5,000 or 10,000 to 20,000 per gauge. So as you run that out, and if we just take an average of that, let's say it's 15,000, then you're at a cost of greater than 30 million to actually have gauges on all siphons across the Delta. And fundamentally, our experience shows us that we don't have a level of confidence that the gauges are providing accurate data. And so this methodology really is our plan A and plan B from a practical standpoint. So next slide, please. And just moving through, I've highlighted most of these values. The world is moving to an OpenET indexing for consumptive use. That's where I think this Delta ACP platform becomes particularly important. It helps us better discern groundwater, surface water budgets, individual watershed budgets. And it really is the best science in the field to help us understand the exercise of water rights and the consistency of the data that is being reported to us. So next slide, please. I wanted to turn a bit to the DRIP program. That's the Delta Drought Response Pilot Program. This program encompassed a 2-year run, was really shepherded actively by my predecessor as a drought response tool across the Delta. It's the objective of the program, which actively involved the Office of the Delta Water Master, Division of Water Rights here, Department of Water Resources, the Delta Conservancy, and the Delta Stewardship Council. So really a great collective effort in seeking, and the values here were to find, okay, how do we get wide geographic distribution? How do we engage different crop types? How do we look at different elevations? And then making sure that we're engaging farmers across the Delta to better understand these outcomes. Next slide, please. And obviously we had just an incredibly different spectrum of water years to look at. The data that we got for water year 23 is of course the result of a very wet year. And in 22, what we saw, actually it should be 21 and 22. It's what we, or no, I'm right, 22, 23, yes. We saw lower air temperatures in 23, higher precipitation levels. And it just helps to look at kind of this two incredibly different water year types, just to look at characteristics in the Delta and how consumptive use responded to that. Next slide, please. Not unpredictably, higher precipitation and the incredible water year that we had showed us actually substantially increasing ET in the delta in the wet year, and you can see that plants obviously in all of our gardens, our plants respond more vigorously to more water. But next slide, please. I think we all felt that it was important to have a wide distribution of traditional crops in the Delta. There was some experimentation with permanent crops, looking at orchards and vineyards, but overwhelmingly looking at seasonal crops. And so we tried to have a representative balance of different crop types across the Delta included in the study. Next slide. So looking at why OpenET, I think we've covered this in great sense, but it is really an ensemble model. So the software, all of the built-in software assumptions are publicly available, publicly discernible in terms of any gaps that might be seen or any elements of the software that might tilt balance in one direction or another. And so it's again, I think that the value of OpenET as a consumptive use indexing tool is critically important, and I think we're achieving substantially greater buy-in to that methodology across all stakeholder groups in this process. So it gives us a great apples to apples way of looking at the data from two very different water years. Next slide, please. So one of our challenges in the study is that we had sort of optimized projections for actual conserved water. And what we found in both water year 22 and 23 was that those savings were overestimated in the Delta. The data tells us that additionally, the higher elevation lands, the higher above sea level you find your land, the easier it is to conserve water for both from a consumptive use analytical standpoint and for stream flow benefit, to actually show direct proportional benefit. Next slide, please. And so overall, roughly a third of the farmland across the Delta is at significantly below 2 feet or more below sea level across the Delta. So that's a critical factor, especially in the southern and central Delta regions. And it is simply that what we found is that the paradox of the high groundwater levels across the deeply subsided lands makes it extremely difficult to conserve water, whether you're involved in crop substitution, deficit irrigation, watering less than you would normally water, or even fallowing that land. So next slide, please. We're going to actually share these results in greater depth at a forum in the Delta on Thursday. And so we have a pretty broad response of stakeholders, farmers, scientists that are actively going to participate in that dialogue on Thursday. So we're excited about that, to get their feedback. There's been a very active survey response program to really find what kinds of practices work better. One of the things I should note is that in year one, the program applied a $900 per acre incentive for all farmers universally. In year two, the program selected for the preferred types of looking at crop substitution or fallowing across the Delta, and additionally for geographic, controlling for things that we wanted to find in the study, ensuring that there were a number of projects. We had below 25% of the projects, or just above 25% of the projects on elevated lands, for example. But using a reverse auction methodology, we found substantial savings on the per acre foot for water delivered back and conserved. So that's certainly a lesson, that we don't want to just have a one-size-fits-all program. We really do want to have a tailored, focused, and drive people to a program in which we're incentivizing the best practices at the lowest price. So next slide, please. So finally, and here's where the work of the Delta Measurement Experimental Consortium kicks in. There is an ongoing study through 2026 that UC Davis will be directing, looking at evapotranspiration via a network of flux towers, so on-the-ground telemetry to look at ET conditions. And so I think that's informative, and that's a real benefit of the study, to have one part of this as a continuum beyond the funded level, which was a 2-year pilot. And then building out from the work, we are continuing to focus substantially on the deeply subsided islands in the Delta Measurement Experimental Consortium studies, and looking at net channel depletion, so finding really truing up water budget analytics from both in the case of the Met Islands, which will be fully gauged at the end of the summer, we will be looking at water balance analytics from pumped water for irrigation and tailwater pumped off the island, as well as the ET dimension. We're looking at tailwater pumping and trying to actually align in the electrical use with water use, so that would, for ease of use, that a farmer could apply software with and an algorithm to better understand exactly how much they're pumping, rather than having to gauge it themselves. And as I noted, we're excited to have this continuing partnership with UC Davis and the Center for Watershed Sciences in looking at the flux tower analytics as we out through water year 26. Next slide, please. So, in this Delta Measurement Experimental Consortium, we're continuing also to look at suitability conditions, tidal energy factors, engaging the Delta Science Program. My colleague, Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham Myers is here, and I'm excited to kind of better integrate all of our work with habitat suitability, flow, and surrounding land use conditions. The board had a briefing, I think, last few weeks on HABs and the strategies for monitoring HABs throughout the Delta. We're really pleased to have active involvement of agencies around the Delta to report in our system quickly in that, and really see if this water year looks more like last year, or does it look like the really foreboding, worrisome conditions that we saw in 22. And so we're looking to integrate multi-benefit projects. And then I think it's really important in the board's consideration as in the process of updating the water quality control plan, that we are really seeing applied science in a way that helps us understand in a real smart experimental design whether hypotheses for performance of flow conditions and habitat are working in the way we intend. And so the Delta Measurement Experimental Consortium continues to look at that. I think our preliminary findings would be that we need some additional gauging to better understand inflow and key circulation conditions in the Delta, especially in low flow times. More active modeling. We've got a nice partnership going with DWR, South Delta Water Agencies, and Contra Costa Water District in looking at data, especially in the South Delta. And finally, just kind of looking at how we integrate this data better to make it more transparent, and can we use existing tools and structures such as the Delta Science Program more actively. And so with that, let me turn to and welcome my esteemed colleague, Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham Myers, to join us for an update on the Delta Science Program today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ziegler. And just really quick, on the Delta Water Masters update, do we have any public comments, Ms. Tyler? Okay, then let's move on to the lead scientist report here. Good to see you, Lisa Marie.
Good to see you too. Thank you so much, board and chair, I should say, and board members. Thank you for having me back. It's been a busy series of months since the last report was in February 2024. And since then, there's been many products and that have reached completion, as well as some new initiatives. And since then, I've also been appointed to the full 3-year term, so I'll be with you for another 2.5 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Next slide, please. I'm going to just orient you again to the mission of our science program. It's called for in the Delta Reform Act, and we serve the council and the broader community to promote inclusive, transparent, and publicly available, accessible science for decision making. So as you probably know, science can get politicized, and what we are really meant to do is be a neutral arbiter. We don't do field work. A lot of our work is basically bringing scientists together, but we do a little bit of research in terms of synthesis, pulling things together to tell a bigger story. Next slide, please. Thank you. When we refer to ourselves as a boundary organization, primarily because we work at the nexus of science and policy, and our mission is to work with others. So we work across disciplines and across this large suite of state, federal, and entities such as academics, all the way down to community-based organizations and the public in general. Next slide, please. So again, our core functions really is how we operate. All of these are basically set to encourage the best practices in science, and they're part of an iterative cycle of doing science, informing decision-making, getting feedback, and then just cycling that through. More specifically, I'm just going to step you through some of these products of ours. So we prioritize research, we promote collaboration, in particular with this science action agenda. These are 2 of our documents that we produce and update, again, through the Delta Reform Act, it's required. These are our flagship documents, and then when we fund research, we expect that the research will somehow address some of the questions that have been put forward in these documents. When we fund, and thanks to the legislature, we've actually been able to give out about $41 million in the past 5 years. When we fund research, we, again, try to focus on things that are going to help with management and with decision making. When we do that science, we're often trying to synthesize disparate data and generate publications that better understand changes in the Delta. And here I'm going to highlight just a couple. So the State of the Bay Delta Science, SBDS reports are come out every 2 years, sometimes 3 years. And the next issue is, this is in the public journal, San Francisco Estuary and Watershed Science. The next one is focused on extreme events. When we synthesize, we also work, for example, with the National Center of Ecological Analysis and Synthesis to build capacity for doing synthesis work, pulling together disparate data, and then also providing that data publicly. Another thing we do is communicate through that Delta Science Tracker, and that is one of our flagship web links where you can look to see what science is being done, where, what stage it's in, what are the products coming out of that. We also support adaptive management, again, required from the Delta Reform Act. And the structured approach that we use with adaptive management is something that we are constantly engaging in. We're looking at potentially putting out a report on where we are with adaptive management, perhaps this year, with one of our goals. We review science, and that's another important function, and those reviews are extremely public. State and federal agencies like the State Water Board or the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation seek our support in facilitating independent peer review, and I'll highlight a couple of those later in this presentation. And then finally, we provide support to the Delta Independent Science Board, which advises the council. So next slide, please. For the remainder of this 15 minutes, I'm just going to highlight some places where we are, places where you may have seen us this year, or you might see us this summer and fall, some active funding requests, some workshops that we've completed and are starting again, some products that we have out for public comments, and then finally some peer review results, and then some updates on the Delta Independent Science Board, and then if there's time, any questions or discussion. So next slide, please. Thank you. So conferences, so it's been a busy year. We had the Interagency Ecological Program annual workshop at the California Natural Resources Building in April. It was extremely well attended. Again, it was in person. It was a very active research community and a lot of syntheses work being presented there. There's a YouTube channel. I just put these links in here so that you can see what's come out from that workshop, and there's some very good discussions in there. At the end of May, they moved the State of the Estuary Conference there. That was again in Oakland. It was supposed to be at the Kaiser Center, got moved to the Scottish Rite Center, and that website also has some abstracts, and I don't think the links are available yet for public viewing, but it will be, and so that's an important conference that we play a role in, and I think will be of interest to this panel. Right after that, we had another science program meeting with coordination with the UC Davis Coastal and Marine Science Institute. It was a focus on food webs, and that was also in person, and there are web recordings of that entire day, discussing basically food web modeling, and then where do we need to go from here, where are some gaps, and how can we get to more ecosystem or functional-based approaches instead of single species approaches to understanding these ecosystems. And then the final one that's actually coming, and I want to make sure it's on your radar, is our flagship conference, the Bay Delta Science Conference. It's finally in person again after 6 years. It's in downtown Sacramento. Our theme is, again, cultivating connections for a dynamically changing environment. We've already had the abstracts deadlines for submission. There's over 300 that have come in. I think it'll be a very active conference, and I hope you'll join us. There's sessions, there's workshops, town halls, all kinds of opportunities for interactions. And yeah, that we're actively planning that right now with a committee that's larger than the Delta Science Program itself. All right, next slide. Thank you. So for funding, we have two big releases that just came out. One is our research awards. This year, we're offering $6 million for research that's focused on co-production and participatory research. It's smaller than in the past, which we've partnered with other agencies for in the past, but this year it's just us. And the solicitation, it's just us as it is right now. But the broad solicitation is intended to advance 25 specific priorities of the Science Action Agenda. And it's the Sea Grant program that actually administers this. So they are processing right now those applications. 83 came in. And so we are hoping that the final submissions that are due August 28th will also be large. Over $60 million was asked for, so we're only able to fund about 1/10 of that, but what we've seen is very impressive, and I'm looking forward to those projects starting in spring 2025. And then towards our past projects, this year we kicked off a new thing called a seminar series that's happening in these months of June and July, including tomorrow. Generally, they're Wednesdays from 10:30 a.m. to noon, and there's short presentations by the project investigators, the PIs, basically talking about the management relevance of what they've found. So those are again recorded. The next one is tomorrow. It's John Takakawa talking about the Suisun Resource Conservation District's work on invasive species, in particular Phragmites australis, which is a pretty large invasive in the Suisun area right now. And the past themes of all of these seminars are generally things like sea level rise, harmful algal blooms, migratory fishes, and then wetland restoration. All right, next slide, please. So towards other funding, we have this open, our Delta Science Fellowships. This is a tremendous opportunity for early career and young researchers. For example, master's, PhD students, postdoctoral scholars can all apply. The intention is that you'll be mentored by a community resident here, a scientist that works in the Delta community here. It got released in April, but the notices of intent are due in June, so next week, and then the final applications are due in August. What especially good aspect of these awards is the training and policy integration that the fellows learn by being as a part of the Delta Science Program and attending Delta Stewardship Council meetings and so on. And we just had an early career leadership workshop, and all of those fellows are now off to other things, including some are staying with our group here at the Delta Stewardship Council. Okay, next slide, please. So workshops, I'm going to plug one that's coming up and then just also briefly talk about a big one that we just completed. So the final workshop in this 2-year series that dealt with salinity management was in the end of March. And we had 2 days of meetings, and the focus of this was really on next steps of collaborative adaptive management of salinity, particularly ocean-based intrusion of salinity in the Delta. So these workshops, again, are available. You can see them on our YouTube channel. There's also a great deal of conversations that happened and data that was collected in breakout rooms that's being completed now and pulled together into a summary. The key focuses were, again, human dimensions of salinity management, and then also demonstration of model results. So some new modeling has been going on, and that'll be completed by the end of this year. The big one I want to plug for you is the July 12th in Stockton Science for Communities workshop. And so next slide, please. This is the one coming up in a month, and it's something that we'd like to start doing on a biennial basis. We had it in 2022, and it was a big success. The purpose of it is it's a free hybrid event for the public, and the audience can range from individuals affiliated with tribes to the whole Delta community, as well as scientists, agency members. It's a very broad group that has shown up in the past and is intended to show up here. The real focus is on discussions that in the past have been on things like things of concern to communities, so accumulation of pollutants, environmental justice, harmful algal blooms, things like that. This year, we have 4 organizations with project topics, and those focus this year is on air quality, climate change, harmful algal blooms, toxic fish consumption, and impacts of flooding in the Delta. So those are the topics we're going to focus on. And in addition, we're trying to provide insight to the communities that send representatives for things like funding. So there's a funding resources panel on the Strategic Growth Council and the Delta Science Program are going to discuss lessons learned and funding opportunities, partnership agreements, templates, grants review, kind of the way this works and how they can get involved. There's also a youth panel, and the purpose of that is to start to engage with the communities that live there, and particularly those at a young age. And there's also going to be a networking hall with the intention of presenters and organizations having tables for events and that people can meet and greet across boundaries. And again, we're hoping to do this every 2 years, so this will be our next one. Okay, next slide, please. So products that are out for public comment, we put out the Delta cyanobacterial harmful algal bloom, also known as CHABs, monitoring strategy. We put that out in February. We got lots of comments back. We even convened the Delta Agency Science Work Group in March. This was presented at DPIC, Delta Protection Interagency Implementation Council, and was endorsed there. And then currently, with all of those comments, the authors are addressing them, and they expect the final version to get submitted this summer. Towards implementation, there is no funding. This is not specifically towards that, but we're able to see that there's other ongoing efforts that we can leverage. So there's a multi-agency advisory group that's going to lead the implementation. And one of your members, Laura Torticlub, is part of that. The NOAA MERHAB project is $3 million. They're targeted on San Francisco estuary prediction of HABs. So this is a wonderful group to partner with here. The State Water Board has also funded the USGS to develop monitoring designs. We're deeply connected with that. Again, Keith Bama-Gregson being also a member of that multi-agency advisory group. And then finally, they call out 19 special studies that they recommend that different groups could choose to lead. So that's a direction that it could go. Okay, next slide, please. I'm going to mention another thing that was released for public comment, and this is our Grand Challenges essay. And the vision here was to basically take the Delta Science Plan and think about reorganizing it in terms of major challenges to the Delta. Like what are some of the big problems that we can solve by coming together scientifically? So towards that end, we've released it. The comments are being accepted until July 12th. You can visit this web link if you'd like. And the intention is that the guidance from here will be used to structure the new plan, to make it more effective, and basically using these compelling and addressable challenges to make sure that we're relevant and guiding the best science practice. And I think I'll just let you read those challenges and also encourage you to visit the website to take a look at those yourself. And please make comments. We are looking for community participation. All right, next slide, please. All right, peer review. This is one of our really essential core functions. The independent, traceable public peer review process is something that we really pride ourselves on. We've done this for, since the initiation of the Delta Reform Act. Two that we recently released are the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation's Fish and Aquatic Effects Analysis, which is an assessment of the long-term operations of the State Water Project, the Central Valley Project. That panel report came out in May. It's with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, and it's also, again, publicly available. You can read the charge, you can read what was asked of the panel, what their responses were, and also feedback from the using agencies. The other one that we just finished was the Department of Water Resources Summer Fall Habitat Action, which is a focus on Delta smelt. And that was something they came to us, it was as required for their incidental take permit. Those reviews came in June. We are actually going to highlight these at the next Delta Stewardship Council meeting, bless you. And so if you're interested, you can tune in for that as well. And then going right from that, these are both related to, and you can go to the next slide, topics that are actually going to be looked at by the National Academies of Science right now. I think you know this. This effort, they've had 3 meetings this year already. There's 2 more National Academies meetings this fall, or should say summer and fall. And then there's a final report expected in 2025. You can, again, see the panel members and where their field trips have been and all of these discussions. But in particular, those Delta Stewardship Council peer review products are being used by them. In fact, the author of the very last, of the Bureau of Reclamation review project on long-term operations, that scientist is going to be presenting to the National Academies on July 19th on the specific outcomes of that review. Again, these are thousands of pages and, 37 models, and it's a lot of work. So, but when you see the summary, sometimes it helps to pull it all together. And then just closing then with that panel member is actually the next slide. Thank you. Is also a member of the Delta Independent Science Board, Kenny Rose. But this whole group, of course, is very productive and very thoughtful resource for us to use to guide our science. 3 of the workshops that they had last year are really coming to completion now. So the product from the November 2023 workshop are going to be a white paper, and then I think an actual publication on upper trophic level interactions in Delta food webs. So basically predation, the big fish that eat the small fish. And that project was in public review till last week. They're consolidating the comments now, and the product from that should be coming out this summer. The next workshop that has products coming out this summer is the Subsided Lands workshop from October. Again, this was a wonderful panel of agencies and farmers and scientists, and just a really great discussion. That work is not yet out for public release, but the expectation is this summer it will be released for public review. And the final one is the deep decision-making under deep uncertainty, something we call DMDU, in case you ever hear us say that word. That seminar series was from last year. It ended in January, and it really it focuses on how to deal with uncertainty in decision making. And it's actually there's a session at the Bay Delta Science Conference on DMDU, and I expect that to be very well attended. And that said, coming to a safe convention center near you this fall, that Bay Delta Science Conference is where I hope I'll see you again next, and I can take any questions. You could go to the last slide. I thank you for having me here.
Looking forward to attending, and just thank you so much, Dr. Wyndham Myers. I know it's just a dynamic time right now. There's a lot going on, but just a lot of potential for synthesis. I can't help but feel, as the board here is contemplating its updates to the Bay Delta plan, that it's just a really critical time to really understand the system we have, and importantly, on the science and monitoring front, shape it here into the future. And so just thank you. It's exciting, especially the community work. There's a lot of, as we know, complexity here, but really connecting to communities and their experiences within the Delta is, I know, a huge priority of the Delta Stewardship Council, has been of the program, and continues to be just really critical in all of this work. And so very appreciative across all that. And thank you, Mr. Ziegler, as well. The work on OpenET, continuing to find these data tools that help us be better decision makers in the face of, yes, a lot of deep uncertainty and also oftentimes a lot of data gaps, is just so critical. And so appreciate the good continued movement across those projects, knowing that they have applicability up and down the state. And as we're updating our water rights data system, modernizing that, being able to incorporate, satellite and remote sensing data is going to be, I think, a critical component of how we try to really wrap our arms around the water rights system in a way that makes us more effective, especially, again, in the face of these challenges that we have. So just really appreciate that continued leadership. And again, we're very fortunate for the Stewardship Council, for the Independent Science Board, and for the lead scientists to continue to help us make our way through what is a lot of research, but again, a real opportunity for synthesis. So I just am incredibly appreciative of the leadership you all continue to exhibit here. So just thank you. Looking to fellow board colleagues if they have any questions or comments, particular for the lead scientists of the Stewardship Council and our Delta Water Master. Board Member McGuire.
Hi, thank you for your presentation this morning. And this is more of a comment than a question at this point, but you've definitely piqued my interest with your presentation and on just so many different topics. And I really appreciate the focus on providing good science to help inform management decisions ultimately, right? And so one thing that I've been working to better do is to actually take that science and make sure that it is being incorporated into management decisions. And I think that's one of the big challenges that we still have. But when I look at all the topics that you've highlighted today and the different studies and workshops and things that are happening on so many different levels, you look at predation issues, you look at salinity management, you look at adaptive management, there's a whole host of other topics as well. I'm really intrigued to go dig in and talk more about all these. But I think those are very relevant issues, and just really appreciate all the work that's being done by the Independent Science Panel, by you, and the Delta Stewardship Council broadly. So just thank you for all of that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Board Member. And actually, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention in public comment, we did hear from John Eric around some concerns on flows on Old and Middle River, some sedimentation that seems to have perhaps further occurred in 2023. I know we have sedimentation issues generally in the South Delta, and desire to understand, what from John Eric, what opportunities there are to maybe address them either through the board's authorities or funding that may be out there. I told him I'd bring it up to you, Mr. Ziegler. I think you may have already been aware a bit of it, but it is something that I think it's worthwhile to just unpack as best we can, knowing that it is a very complex system, and how best to address especially these flow issues on Old and Middle River, I think are obviously a front of mind, have been for a long while, not just for this board, but for operators out in the Delta, and just wanted to make sure and make good flag of it here. So.
Yeah, just in responding to that, we do have a very active dialogue going with South Delta Water Agency, some modelers that they have hired, modelers that DWR as well. We're integrating that. We're trying also to align the monitoring and special studies program in the South Delta to really look at these issues of circulation, especially in Middle River. And so I think we're trying in real time to stay as aligned as we can on what the hydrologic conditions are, how DWR looks at that, how South Delta looks at that, how South Delta diverters are looking at that. And so I think we're trying to get in a culture of information sharing in that spirit. John's hypothesis is that as we hit flow levels under 4,000 CFS in a month or so, that he's likely to see some diverters that are kind of high and dry from their pumps. And so we're looking at, well, okay, in those scenarios, what methods can we take to allow for temporary means of applying pumps and coordination with other diverters to meet irrigation needs that. So we're kind of, I think, trying to address this affirmatively with a very open and direct dialogue with South Delta Water Agency, and we're committed to continue that through the summer, watching conditions very closely.
I appreciate that. And to your point, the joint modeling, seeing the same, reality and set of circumstances is just so fundamental to all the work that we're doing here to be able to actually mobilize action, common action toward actual solutions toward it. So appreciate the work, and much thanks on that. All right, looking to fellow board colleagues in case there is anything further, and hearing none. And Ms. Tyler, no commenters? Well, great. Really appreciate the update, and I know looking forward to the continued work here all amongst it. So thank you so much. That now brings us to item number 6, and which will be here presented by our water rights team regarding the Kachuma project reconsideration order. Give folks a moment to shuffle up. Thank you. Good morning. Good to see you all.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great.
Thank you.
So good morning, Chair Esquivel, members of the board. My name is Penn Scoble. I'm an attorney in the Office of Chief Counsel. With me today is Diane Riddle, Assistant Deputy Director of the Division of Water Rights, and Max Cassell, who's an environmental scientist in the division's Hearings and Special Projects Unit. And today we're here to present on a proposed order responding to the United States Bureau of Reclamation's petition for reconsideration of Order WR 2019-0148, which amended Reclamation's permits for operation of the Kachuma project. Next slide, please. So I'll begin with a little bit of background. The Kachuma project is a water supply project located in Santa Barbara County on the Santa Ynez River. Bradbury Dam, which used to be Kachuma Dam, was built in 1953 prior to enactment of many environmental protection laws. Construction and operation of the Kachuma project has had a negative impact on steelhead in the area. And Southern California steelhead are a distinct population segment of anadromous trout designated as endangered under the Federal Endangered Species Act. A large portion of their historic historical spawning and rearing habitat is upstream from Bradbury Dam and Kachuma Reservoir, and obstruction of steelhead migration has been identified as one of the prime factors behind the population segment's decline. After the board issued water right permits for operation of the Kachuma project to reclamation in 1958, the board reserved jurisdiction to set fish flow requirements as more information became available. A couple of decades later, in the 1980s, Reclamation submitted a change petition to expand the project's water delivery area and water uses. And a few years after that, the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance filed a complaint related to the effects of the Kachuma project on steelhead. As a result, the State Water Board held a series of hearings to evaluate Reclamation's change petition and determine measures necessary to protect public trust resources and downstream water rights. Next slide, please. This series of hearings culminated in adoption of Order WR 2019-0148 in September of 2019. The 2019 order includes various research and reporting requirements, including Term 24A, which directs Reclamation to investigate fish passage options for steelhead around the dam and submit a study report to the Deputy Director. The 2019 order also identifies two documents, a 2013 biological assessment prepared by Reclamation and a 2016 draft biological opinion prepared by the National Marine Fisheries Service as sources of current scientific information that could be used to inform submittals required under the order. Both documents were prepared after the Kachuma hearing officer closed the evidentiary portion of the record in 2012. Following issuance of the 2019 order, Reclamation submitted a petition for reconsideration. Next slide, please. Thank you. In its petition, Reclamation makes two arguments in challenging the 2019 order. First, it claims Term 24A is invalid because Reclamation lacks the authority to conduct a fish passage study absent specific authorization from Congress. As part of this argument, Reclamation claims that Term 24A would require it to violate federal laws, specifically Title 16 United States Code, Section 460L-19, which forbids Reclamation from preparing a feasibility report unless specifically authorized to do so. And just as a brief aside, it's worth noting that since submitting its petition for reconsideration, Reclamation has not begun work on the Term 24A fish passage study. Second, Reclamation contends that the 2019 order improperly references NMFS's 2016 draft biological opinion, and that absent an evidentiary hearing on whether the draft biop should be admitted into evidence, that the board must strike any reference to it in the 2019 order. Next slide, please. Staff have carefully reviewed the arguments raised in Reclamation's petition for reconsideration. Beginning with Reclamation's first assertion, staff does not agree that Reclamation has no authority to evaluate fish passage options absent specific authorization from Congress. In fact, Reclamation has both the authority and duty to operate Bradbury Dam in a manner consistent with Reclamation law, California law, and the Federal Endangered Species Act. Specifically, Section 8 of the Reclamation Act of 1902 requires that Reclamation operate water projects in compliance with state laws relating to the control, appropriation, use, or distribution of water used in irrigation. Section 8 establishes a system of cooperative federalism governing how Reclamation operates its holdings. Application of state law to a Reclamation project is valid unless directly inconsistent with a clear congressional directive. Here, Term 24A is a valid exercise of the board's continuing supervisory authority over state waters under the Public Trust Doctrine, and in furtherance of the board's duty to prevent waste and unreasonable use, method of use, and method of diversion. There is no inherent conflict between operating Bradbury Dam for water supply purposes and investigating fish passage options as required under Term 24A. Likewise, there's no clear congressional intent that prevents Reclamation from complying with the Federal Endangered Species Act. In its petition, Reclamation contests that when construction of the dam was first approved, Congress did not authorize any fish and wildlife purpose or features. But the legislative records cited by Reclamation in its petition predate both enactment of the Endangered Species Act and Southern California steelhead's listing as an endangered population segment. When the project was first planned, neither Congress nor Reclamation considered the potential need for changes in operations to protect steelhead from extinction. Next slide, please. Next, Reclamation makes the specific sub-argument that term 24A conflicts with Title 16 USC Section 460L-19, which again prohibits Reclamation from preparing a feasibility report under reclamation law without specific congressional authorization. So the key question here is whether term 24A requires Reclamation to prepare a feasibility report or a feasibility study. Staff believe it does not. The phrase feasibility report is a term of art referring specifically to detailed reports required as one of the final planning steps prior to approval of a water project or project alteration. It includes specific findings as to engineering feasibility, estimated cost, and how Reclamation could recoup that cost. If a feasibility report confirms that the proposed project meets certain conditions, that project is deemed authorized and can be undertaken without any further review by Congress. The fish passage study report required by term 24A is not a feasibility report because it does not include the required elements, nor have the same legal weight. Instead, it is intended to gather initial information, identifying fish passage options and assessing relative costs and benefits. Next slide, please. Reclamation also challenges the 2019 order's references to a 2016 draft biological opinion by the National Marine Fisheries Service. Reclamation cites Government Code Section 11425.50, which requires that the statement of the factual basis for a final board order be based exclusively on evidence of record. Here, the board did not rely on the 2016 draft BIOP to support any findings on contested factual issues. Instead, the draft biological opinion, which is a document prepared by an agency with undisputed scientific expertise in evaluating the condition of fish populations, is referenced as a piece of current scientific information that Reclamation should consider when evaluating how best to keep steelhead in good condition. So the board did not make an error in law by referring to the 2016 draft BIOP, and there is no need to remove these references from the order. Next slide, please. So for these reasons, staff has drafted a proposed order denying Reclamation's petition for reconsideration. In addition to denying the petition, this proposed order requires Reclamation to complete and submit a study report within 24 months of the adoption of this proposed order. It also requires Reclamation to submit a study plan within 3 months and to provide progress updates to the Deputy Director every 3 months beginning October 15th, 2024. Next slide, please. On March 8th, 2024, the board issued a notice of opportunity to comment on a draft of this proposed order. After receiving several extension requests, the board extended the deadline for submitting written comments to May 2nd, 2024. The board received 5 timely comment letters from the United States Bureau of Reclamation, Cachuma Conservation Release Board, Santa Ynez River Water Conservation District Improvement District Number 1, Santa Barbara Fly Fishers, and the National Marine Fisheries Service. The board also received 2 slightly late submittals from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and California Trout. After reviewing these comment letters, staff made a few minor changes to the draft order. And to very briefly touch on a couple of the comment letters received, I'm not going to go into all of them, but first, Reclamation proposed that as an alternative to term 24A, the board request a special study via letter, working through cost sharing and scoping issues. Staff considered this request and do not recommend pursuing this alternative to the enforceable term 24A study requirement already contained in the initial 2019 order. Second, the Cachuma Conservation Release Board asserted that the board's authority to require a fish passage study is preempted because it is an order term outside the scope of Section 8 of the Reclamation Act of 1902. Staff have carefully reviewed this comment and disagree with the lines of argument raised within it. Staff believe that the fish passage study and the board's authorities under the public trust doctrine and the reasonable use doctrine to require that study fall squarely within Section 8's coverage of state laws relating to the control, appropriation, use, and distribution of water used in irrigation. So no change was made as a result of that comment either. And that brings us to the end of this staff presentation. We'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. I really appreciate the overview. And looking to fellow board colleagues in case there's comment or question off the bat. And seeing none, I know we have a few commenters here, so we can go to them. I believe our first commenter will be Michael Jackson from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. Be followed by Maggie Hall, Peter Cantel, Scott Shapiro, and then we'll continue on from there. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Appreciate you joining us here. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Board. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the Kachuma project. So we had, again, revisited our authorities with regard to what we interpreted initially, at least, as the feasibility study, which the board was requesting or directing reclamation in its proposed, in its initial order, and then the draft order on that. And so we appreciate the board's clarification that you weren't looking for the reclamation lingo of when we see feasibility study, it perks our ears, and there's a lot of can be confusion around that. With that, we're not 100% sure of what the difference is of what you're looking for, but it sounds like something not quite as detailed as what we would do in a full-blown feasibility study, which would be a planning study that then would go eventually to the president and then to Congress. And so with that, that pushes us into our planning authorities, and we have authority, appraisals and special studies authority, in which various contractors or other constituencies may want a particular study on a particular project, be it power, be it water supply, be it fish, be it solar. And so with those, there's a cost share requirement in those. I think we're limited to up to 50% of federal dollars that we can contribute toward that. So in our comment, we suggested if the board wanted to pursue that we could collaborate. I know you're in a regulatory role, but to perhaps get at closer to what you're looking for in this analysis and perform a study in that manner and under that authority as we see it. So that's generally the nature. We're trying to bridge the gap between the tension that we have between what the board's trying to accomplish under its mission and duties and authorities, and what we're trying to accomplish under our broad mission and authorities as well. So that was our hope, that we could work on something together. We've got a number of studies on the Kachuma project that we have not contested, but probably take a number of PhDs to level work to carry out under a number of years for different hydrologies that may manifest themselves as time comes. So that would conclude my remarks, Mr. Chairman.
Really appreciate that, Mr. Jackson. I appreciate you working with us here and unpacking what is otherwise a specific term within the parlance of the Bureau of Reclamation, and getting to hear what is a more common understanding of what the board is asking for. So I can understand Reclamation's initial position on this and appreciate working with us here on reconsideration and better understanding here what the board is looking for, and not necessarily a full-blown feasibility study that, again, as you said, would end up going to the president, and here within Reclamation's parlance is a different animal, if you will, altogether. So, or maybe not altogether, but at least enough so that, again, caused enough concern with Reclamation as to this request from us. So just thank you. Thank you for working with us. Thank you for coming to that better understanding, and look forward to what I know will be work on the back end here to actually get that completed. And so, and hearing here that, there's a need, I guess, for a 50% cost share for the work that would be anticipated to be done under your planning authorities. Okay. Well, thank you. I much appreciated.
Thank you. On a totally different matter, I just want to thank the chair, Mr. Chairman, for, I understand you visited the Friant area with some of the other taxing issues we have on groundwater. So thank you for that.
Thank you as well. I know there's a lot of work across the state with Reclamation, and it's good to be, this part of the state further down by the south, but just appreciate everything that we're doing together here. So thank you for that, Mr. Jackson. Thank you.
Can I ask, since Mr. Jackson's here, thank you for being here, by the way, just if I could ask a question so I can understand the limitations or opportunities that Reclamation has here to conduct various studies. So My recollection, and I was on the board in 2019 when we adopted this, so I have some memory, although it's getting a little fuzzy, was that there are a number of different studies that were asked for and expected of reclamation. You mentioned that there was some other work. So is that work being fully funded and completed as directed, or is it just, basically what I'm trying to figure out is it just the fish passage study that you need, you're requesting 50% cost share on, or is it all studies that have been directed to reclamation?
Yeah, it was just the fish passage study, because that was a little bit of a different animal than the other studies that were I don't recall all of them off the top of my head, but those were on with our operations and consequences of the water order and consequences of those impacts to the fishery. I think that was that, and we didn't have any arguments to put on that one, so okay, or anything with that. So we're proceeding as best we can, but those are not trivial matters.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that question, board member. And thank you again, Mr. Jackson. Next, I'd like to call up Maggie Hall, be followed by Peter Cantel, and then Scott Shapiro and Stephen Torrigan.
Good morning. I'm Maggie Hall with the Environmental Defense Center. I'm speaking today on behalf of California Trout. We would like to express our support for the board's order denying the Bureau of Reclamation's petition for reconsideration, along with the circulated modifications. And in particular, we really appreciate the inclusion of the quarterly reporting requirements. Cal Trout, as a party to the proceedings, is a nonprofit river conservation organization with a substantial interest in the public trust resources of the San Ynez River, including California steelhead. Fish passage is critical to protect steelhead by ensuring they have access to their historic spawning and rearing habitat upstream of the dam. The study requirement in the order, term 24A, is reasonable and is a great first step to achieve the necessary objective, and we look forward to timely compliance with this term. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Appreciate your participation here and contributions to the discussion. Thank you. Next, I'd like to call up Peter Cantel, be followed by Scott Shapiro.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thanks so much. Senior staff, it's good to be here. I appreciate it. My name is Peter Cantel. I'm the executive director of the Cachuma Conservation Release Board, or SWRCB. Again, thank you for the opportunity to address the board on this matter. I'm joined by Scott Shapiro with Downey Brand, who will be up shortly. CCRB is a joint powers authority comprised of the Goleta Water District, the City of Santa Barbara, and the Montecito Water District. We represent a constituency of over 200,000 people, as well as a vibrant and robust business and agricultural community on the south coast of Santa Barbara County. Cachuma Reservoir has been and continues to be a critical and important source of potable water for our constituents and our ratepayers. Recognizing this importance, CCRB and its member agencies nonetheless have a strong history of sincere commitment in achieving two interrelated goals, which are preserving this essential water supply to the South Coast, and at the same time, working to ensure that Southern California steelhead continue to survive and, in time, thrive in the lower Santa Ynez River watershed. To be sure, there are challenges, not the least of which are prolonged droughts, such as what we just endured, as well as wildfire and climate change-related impacts. In the face of such challenges, CCRB and its members remain steadfastly committed to the ideal of balancing water supply needs with the water and habitat needs of this endangered species, as evidenced by, among other things, the multitude of fisheries enhancement projects our members have supported and continue to implement. We look forward to continuing these efforts with our partners, including the Cachuma Operation and Maintenance Board, other local Cachuma stakeholders and NGOs such as EDC, the Bureau of Reclamation, Michael and his staff, the state and federal oversight agencies, and your folks, your staff at the Water Board on these important programs and issues. Thank you again for this opportunity. I'd like to hand it over to Scott Shapiro for some legal remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Cantel.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Scott Shapiro with Downey Brand, representing CCRB. And I don't want to use my time to recount what's already in our letter. I'm confident you've all know how to read and have reviewed it and will make the decision that you think appropriate. I did want to add a few points that I thought might provide a little bit of clarity, though. I'm struggling with understanding how the board exercises its regulatory authority over reclamation to make it execute a study which is a voluntary product under federal law requiring a cost share. I'm just not feeling like we're dealing with a situation that aligns. It's a little bit like a square peg in a round hole, using a regulatory authority to make somebody do something that requires a third-party action unless the board by this regulatory authority is giving your staff permission to cost share on the study. So I'm just not understanding how that's going to work, and I think it would be useful to clarify that before the board were to issue an order. It would be a shame if we come back 24 months from now and nothing's happened and you're frustrated and we're frustrated and reclamation doesn't know what to do. So I would encourage the board to consider to address that issue. Likewise, I did want to at least go back for a moment to our argument that the order improperly references the biological opinion, which was not included in evidence. And again, I promised I wouldn't just recount what I had said before, but in preparing for this morning, we noticed a related issue. Term 24, which is the term that requires the study, actually incorporates material from NIMS and CDFW, which was never admitted into the record as well. Term 24 states, unless the deputy director provides for a variation, the study shall conform to the Santa Ynez River Fish Passage feasibility analysis submitted by NIMS on February 16, 2004, and CDFW on February 17, 2004 during this proceeding. However, on April 16th of 2004, your own hearing officer granted a motion to strike the appendices which included those two documents. So now we have three different documents that are referenced in your order favorably that were actually not included in the record. And I understand the position of staff that it's acceptable to reference a document that's not in the record. Our feeling is this is going beyond referencing. This is really referencing favorably. You're saying, consider this. And so now we have three documents that are not in the record, which the order references favorably. I'll note finally that there have been a number of studies at Fish Passage on Kachuma, and I certainly am someone who recognizes the need to try to resolve some of these issues, but CCRB is not understanding how another study is going to necessarily resolve this. The topography hasn't changed, the conditions haven't significantly changed, the solutions for Fish Passage haven't significantly changed, and so to the extent that USBR ultimately does a study and is looking for its water users to help fund the federal 50% share, we'll be potentially funding money for another study which won't necessarily advance the ball. So as you consider this final order, please do consider whether this order, and particularly condition 24, is going to advance the ball or whether we're just adding further confusion into the record. Thank you very much.
Fair enough. And thank you, Mr. Shapiro. I appreciate the points you brought up. Just thank you. Next, I know these next two commenters were speak as necessary, but I'll go ahead and call up, and if you aren't wishing to speak, by all means can pass. Next will be Stephen Torrigiani, be followed by Steve Anderson.
Yes, thank you, Chair and Board. Yeah, I would speak if necessary, and I don't have any comments, so thank you very much.
Thank you as well. Appreciate the participation nonetheless. And next then would call up Steve Anderson.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair, members of the board. I'm Steve Anderson. I'm an attorney for Santa Ynez River Water Conservation District, Improvement District Number 1. We have submitted a comment letter, but just to give a little bit of background, ID1 is a retail water service provider in the Santa Ynez area. They are also a project or a member of the Kachuma project, they receive water from reclamation. We submitted a comment letter that covered a few different issues, but I just want to tack on a little bit on the second issue that Mr. Shapiro brought up related to the references to the 2016 draft biological opinion. What we shared in our letter was that in the ordinary course of the way that the federal government operates under the Endangered Species Act, draft biological opinions are not finalized and therefore not considered for citable purposes under the ESA Section 7 handbook and some case law as well. And so it seems very awkward to us that there would be any reference at all to the 2016 BIOP in the draft order. But assuming that what your staff put in the staff report, which was, hey, we got a comment letter from CDFW and another one from NIMS, and so they referenced it, and so that's the only purpose we were using it for. We didn't make any factual findings on it. I understand that, but what concerns ID1 is the fact that the 2016 draft BIOP is referenced specifically in term 15 and term 26, and effectively reclamation is directed to consider what's inside that draft biological opinion as part of satisfying and undertaking the reports required by those two terms. It seems to me that it would be best to strike the references to the 2016 BIOP from the actual order part of the order with the terms in it. If it's in the other part of the order, we're just cross-referencing a comment letter or something, that is understandable. It's just a reflection of what happened, but it seems inappropriate legally in light of the way the federal government handles its ESA procedures to reference that BIOP in those two terms. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that concern. I think, you know, what fundamentally we kind of run up to and up against here is the difference between state law and authorities and ultimately the Endangered Species Act as well, and some obvious specifics that are there. Can I ask if there's just a practical concern around the incorporation, not incorporation, but reference, but even the usage of any of that science or data it's housed in there?
Well, I don't want to speak for reclamation, but they are close to finalizing, perhaps in the next year, Mr. Jackson, a biological assessment to move forward with the second ESA process. And if they're going forward with the second ESA process, that's going to, be full gangbusters in 2025, and yet they're required by this order to look at an 8-year-old draft biological opinion in order to carry forward their studies. It seems like the biological assessment they're preparing that will be followed by a new BO, that will have the current science in it. Not something that's 8 years old, that doesn't incorporate all the data that's been collected in the last 8 years, all the progress that's been made. So it just seems awkward to have a direction to look at something old when they're doing something new is our concern.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think, it doesn't preclude, obviously, using that new information here. It's, again, just a reference to the usage of it, not necessarily the study needing to be based completely off of it. So, but I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that unpacking of that. I appreciate the concern. Looking to fellow board colleagues if they have any question, comment, further discussion on the item.
I'm just wondering if staff want to respond to the comments.
Sure, I'll start with that last one. I think Chair Esquivel sort of covered this, but considering a 2016 draft BIOP absolutely does not preclude consideration of other scientific information, especially more recent scientific information. So that's our response to that. As far as why a new fish passage study could be useful in this case, I think there was a reference to earlier studies done. There was one done in 2000, but one of the conclusions of that study was that further study was necessary. And also just since 2000, there have been considerable tech advances. True, the topography hasn't changed, but technology has changed. So I think those are two reasons to require another study. Do you want to speak to the...
Sure. So,
sorry, Mr. Castle, just turn your mic on there.
Yes, thank you. To the concern about the reference to the 2016 draft biological opinion, I do understand the concern with being asked to look at a specific piece of information. The reference to the 2016 biological opinion is directing Reclamation to consider the most up-to-date scientific evidence and information on the issue. At the time the order was released in 2019, that 2016 biological opinion was the most recent example of up-to-date scientific information. Obviously, as time passes, the most up-to-date scientific information is going to change, which is why the reference in the order to this 2016 biological opinion doesn't say you must consider exactly this, but rather you should consider the most up-to-date scientific information, of which this 2016 opinion is an example. So if Reclamation's work resulted in them putting out a newer species assessment that contained more up-to-date information, they should, by all means, use that to guide their efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Castle. Thank you, Mr. Scobel. Ms.
And lastly, I can respond to the question related to the crosswalk between federal law and state water rights law. And I'll let Penn chime in here as well, but Reclamation has an independent authority to comply with California water right requirements, including conditions of their water rights imposed by state water board orders such as this order. And this isn't uncommon. Their Reclamation has many requirements on their water rights to complete studies and analyses and monitoring. So this would be another instance of that. Given how old these rights are, there were less studies in the initial issuance of the permits for these water rights. Those water rights, are subject to change the terms and conditions over time to reflect the updated needs for protection of beneficial uses of water. This is something we commonly do. Water Right Decision 1641 is a good example of that. We've got many study, monitoring, reporting requirements included in that decision that have been modernized over time and updated over time. So this is another instance in which, and this was a central issue of the hearing for this project, was to look at what updates to the conditions are needed in order to provide for the reasonable protection of fish and wildlife, including steelhead in this river system. So this is following through on the purpose for the hearing.
I have nothing to add. That was brilliant.
Thank you, Ms. Riddle, Ms. Scobel, Mr. Castle. Looking to see if there's anything from that what's that? Oh, Dee Dee, sorry. Apologies, Dee Dee. Dee Dee, please. Vice Chair.
No, it's fine. Thank you. And thank you, Board Member Firestone, for asking on follow-up. And I think I understand things at this point. I think the additional time and the comments that we received has been very helpful, and appreciate the edits that have been provided. But as far as, any remaining confusion, there just doesn't seem to be any on this issue of the feasibility study. And it's hard for me to tell, but if Mr. Jackson is still in the room, maybe hear from him as to the question or the concerns about confusion. But what I was hearing was that the Bureau appreciated our further edits, clarifying that this is not a feasibility study in the sense of, the process that they go through to get congressional authorization and appropriation. But I guess feasibility with a small f in the context of, the normal process that they would have to go through regarding feasibility, not a full-blown study. So just seeking any further comment from him, because I think the comments that have been raised seem to imply that there's ongoing confusion, but that's not what the case seems to be.
Agree, Vice Chair. And I don't know if Mr. Jackson, you did want to provide any further follow-up or clarification from the exchanges you've heard here.
Thank you, Ms. Diadamo, Mr. Chair. We're hopeful that there's no further confusion on it, and that's why we're asking to collaborate, to perhaps be somewhat able to sit side by side and say, is this what you're looking for? Is this the level of detail? I should say, in the feasibility, generally those involve construction. I think our letter noted not everything that you provided in the clarification was a construction issue, and that's the part that was getting us with feasibility and construction and a lot of details, more specific cost estimates and all those types of things go into a feasibility report, as well as comparing it with ability to meet current authorizations and everything else, the existing water right order, all that stuff. Would be a lot more detailed in a feasibility level, but we don't want to go down the road and prepare something, then you say, oh, that's not the rock we wanted. We wanted a different one. It's not enough detail, perhaps, in it. So that's generally what we do. That is what we do under these type of studies. When we're working with our contractors or any other constituency that might want to study, we kind of define the scope and the things we're going to look at and all that, and the level of effort is the parties have a understanding.
Appreciate that, Mr. Jackson. I know we definitely will work with you. Ms. Riddle, I don't know if you have some thought.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to point out the order does contemplate this very need in term 20. It does provide the opportunity for us to work together to refine what's needed from the study in coordination with the fishery agencies. So we're happy to do that. We haven't been able to do that while we've been in this petition for reconsideration phase of the process, but once that is over, we are able to discuss this issue in detail along with the fisheries agencies, and there are specific provisions for that included in term 20 of the order.
Appreciate that, Ms. Riddle. And yeah, what I imagine we'll be able to now do is really just scope out what it is that we're looking for along with the biological agencies, and be able to understand what ultimately the cost would be to reclamation, here acknowledging that there's a 50% cost share that reclamation would be looking for the study. So much appreciated. Well, thank you. I appreciate the exchange. I know I'm still supportive here, but look to fellow board colleagues if there's any further question or motion.
So I'll just first start off by thanking staff for working with Reclamation and really clarifying what is being asked for. And thank also Mr. Jackson for working with us and just taking the time to sit down and work with our staff to clarify. And I know, we'll be working with you through this. So with that, I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you both. Ms. Tyler, can you please call a roll call vote?
Board Member Morgan?
Aye.
Board Member McGuire?
Aye.
Board Member Firestone?
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo?
Aye.
And Chair Esquivel?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. Motion carries and the order is adopted. Much appreciated for, again, all the good work and what will be further discussion now still yet. So thank you. All right, that concludes item number 6 and brings us to our last item of the day, which is board member reports. Looking to fellow board colleagues if they have reports they'd like to start in on.
I do not have a report.
Board member.
I don't have a report either.
No report.
No report.
I will quickly give a report. Just last week, had the pleasure of joining Mayor Karen Bass, Secretary Garcia in Los Angeles to acknowledge and commemorate the $880 million that the State Water Resources Control Board was able to put toward water debt and arrearages within the state that wiped out 2 years worth of debt for both drinking water and wastewater arrears. Covered nearly 4 million Californians, 10% of the state received some benefit, and ultimately 96%, you can tell my talking points are still fresh, 96% of the state was covered by systems here that participated in the program. Those are amazing numbers. Have to give just complete credit to our folks in the program, both at Division of Financial Assistance, but also Division of Drinking Water and Division of Water Quality that seamlessly got these dollars out. This was a quiet success insofar as amongst, I know, a lot of the board's work that gets attention, this is something that we simply did and got done. And it was nice to be able to commemorate and celebrate that with leadership, and look forward to what I know is a very robust discussion on affordability and the continued need here throughout the state for it. So was governed to participate last week in that. And additionally, toured around Thule Subbasin. It was a trip that I know Board Member McGuire were paired on the Subbasin for the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and had to reschedule twice. And so I'm glad I finally got out there and was able to tour around as we continue to have really incredibly difficult but incredibly important discussions on SGMA. So that's my brief report. And I think that now with that brings us to the end of today's board meeting.
I just wanted to touch that in addition to the folks you mentioned, Division of Administrative Services really went out of their way to get those checks out, and they're still continuing to do that.
Thank you. Remiss in that, and know that they are in fact paper checks. I know LADWP remarked how amazing it was to receive a check with of such substantial amount in paper form. I'm glad they're all getting out there for folks. So, and thank you for that. We will now move into closed session. We will not have closed session on. We will have closed session on sites, I believe here. We will not have closed session on Title 6 discussions. But Mr. Lawfer, is there anything further?
Yeah, and it's probably obvious to everyone who's following along, but we will also not be having a closed session on the Kachuma item since the board has acted on it. So the only item will be the site's administrative hearings office item. And for the board members, we will be meeting in conference room 2510, so Vice Chair Diadamo can join us. I propose meeting up there no earlier than 11, just so that we can get set up.
Around 11 sounds great. And so Mr. Lawfer will close us out once closed session is over. And once that happens, we're done with our board meetings here for this week. And we'll then see everyone July 2nd and 3rd for our next scheduled board meeting. Until then, everyone be well, and we will see you soon. Thank you very much for good morning discussion and items here. Thanks all.